Hello and welcome to Rome Time. My name's Elliott and with me today is Paddy.
Hi there.
And this is the start of our new series on the great men of Rome and the classical period. So a general synopsis of our show is we're going to be looking at the great characters that you might not have heard of from the history of Rome. Trying to cover those that have made like great impacts on the civilization. It's like the great man theory, but it's like taken down a tiny notch. So we're looking at those great men, but they're not great man. Like everyone's heard of your Caesar, your Augustus, your Hadrian, your Trajan, all those classical
Big dogs.
emperors. We're going to be taking more of a focus on this. They are big dogs in their right, but you might not have heard of them, so it's always nice to cover those that haven't been heard of before. So while I was doing research for this episode, I came across kind of a nice quote from Livy that I'd like to start with today. It's almost like such a great it's a great intro. I'll just read it out anyway. Quote, whether I am likely to accomplish anything worthy of the labour, if I record the achievements of the Roman people from the foundation of the city, I do not really know, nor if I knew would I dare to avouch it, perceiving as I do that the theme is not only old but hackneyed, through the constant succession of new historians who believe either that in their facts they can produce more authentic information, or that in their style they will prove better than the rude attempts of the ancients. Yet, however this shall be, it will be a satisfaction to have done myself as much as lies in me to commemorate the deeds of the foremost people of the world, and if in so vast a company of writers my own reputation should be obscure, my consolation would be the fame and greatness of those whose renown will throw mine into the shade.
Wow.
End quote.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I do like a bit of, or that ties pretty well into what I was going to talk about next, and the sources. Actually, before I talk about sources, as the first episode, we're going to be talking about the mythical founder of Rome, going back a step, Romulus, and his tiny little brother Remus, who's not long for this world, but we'll get to that later. So the sources that we used for this are Plutarch's Parallel Lives, Romulus, and Virgil's Aeneid, as well as Livy's Ab Urbe Condita, from which the quote that I read out a minute ago was taken from. However, it's annoying, but these aren't primary sources of information. They're actually secondary sources. Both Plutarch and Livy quote their histories from Quintus Fabius Pictor as their source. So, a quick fact about Quintus is that he actually wrote his histories in Greek instead of Latin. It was actually popular to write histories or anything intellectual in Greek back then. It was like the lingua franca of the time. It's a bit like how French became like the lingua franca in like the 19th century. Like a good example of that is in Germany, the highest, or pre World War One, World War Two, the highest medal that could be earned was the Pour le Mérite, which, considering they're Germans and they hate the French, is kind of strange to be calling your highest title by its French name. So yeah, it's actually kind of common for people who are like educated, though people in like Rome tend to speak Greek and Latin, a bit like people sometimes nowadays know Latin and English. Another use of Greek was when Caesar, when he was about to cross the Rubicon, he shouted the die is cast, but it's always quoted nowadays as being in Latin, but in fact at the time he declared it in Greek. It's actually a quote from the playwright Menander, who wrote plays in Athens, I believe. So anyway, yeah, the history of this, or the point of this podcast is focused on the great men.
let's get right into it, shall we?
Yeah, let's get into Romulus and Remus.
Yeah. All right. So there's quite a few different theories back in the day as to how Rome was formed. A lot of them center around a woman called Roma, who told the Trojans who had come there to burn their ships, and originally they were angry at that, but they found good fortune after that, so they named the city after her. So some say that she was the daughter of Italus and Lucaria, or Telephus, the son of Heracles, and she was married to Aeneas, or another version to Ascanius, the son of Aeneas. But none of these theories are the ones that most people know. Most people know it as the descendants of Aeneas who came to Rome from Troy on a long journey. The succession devolved into two brothers called Numitor and Amulius.
Yeah. So Numitor and from Aeneas founded his small little kingdom after escaping the long-haired Greeks at Troy. Made this journey across the Mediterranean. Met Dido of Carthage. Not to be confused with the awful pop singer, but
Not about awful.
I don't know.
Pretty good.
I don't know. She's kind of annoying sometimes. Anyway, back to Aeneas. So the kings of Alba ruled in linear descent from Aeneas until the succession devolved upon the two brothers that Paddy mentioned, Numitor and Amulius. So instead of one of them taking everything, the two brothers proposed to... Actually, it wasn't the two brothers. Amulius proposed to divide things into two equal shares and set as equivalent to the kingdom, the treasure, and the gold that were brought from Troy. So Numitor, being a bit silly, decided to choose the kingdom, and Amulius, clearly with the bigger brain, chose to take all the money. And we all know what money does. It allows you to do anything. So as soon as they split, Amulius used his money to take the kingdom from Numitor with great ease. And Numitor, fearing that his daughter, or not Numitor, Amulius feeling that Numitor's daughter might have children, made her a Vestal Virgin and bound her in that condition forever to live a single and maiden life. The name of Numitor's daughter was Rhea Silvia. So I just wanted to go over a few notes on the Vestal Virgins. It's always nice to get in these bits of information, just kind of slotting them in. Otherwise, I don't really want to do an entire episode on the Vestal Virgins. But anyway, so the Vestals were priestesses of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth. There was lots of myths depicting Vesta and her priestesses. But what I find hilarious was that they weren't the most PG sights from the god, really. So there's been tales of miraculous impregnation by a phallus appearing in the flames of a fire. It's just it's just so weird. It's just, I don't know what to say about it. It's just, the Romans just loved the phalluses. Every statue, they must start carving the phallus first and then move on to the rest of the body. It's always the key part. So anyway, Vesta was the daughter of Saturn and Opis, and the sister of Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto, Juno, and Ceres. In Greek mythology, her closest equivalent is Hestia. Vesta's importance to the Roman religion was kind of it was the most important one, really. It was actually the last Roman pagan cult still active following the rise of Christianity, and it wasn't actually disbanded until until CE 391 by the Christian Emperor Theodosius I. So anyway, enough of the Vestal Virgins. We'll get back to the story.
Yeah. So this Vestal Virgin, who's variously called Ilia, Rhea, or Sylvia. We
Yeah.
should call her Sylvia.
Yeah, we'll just call her Sylvia.
Sylvia. She was discovered to be with child, which is not what the Vestal Virgins are allowed to do.
No, not at all. You can't take an oath saying you won't be sleeping around. You just show up one day and you got a big belly.
Yeah. And then she did deliver the babies in solitary confinement. And they were big old babies, big boys, with size and beauty more than human. Which is what Plutarch says.
She must have really struggled to push those out.
Yeah.
Jesus. They're like 2 full-grown men just popping out.
And this made Amulius pretty scared. So he ordered a servant to take the boys and cast them away. And the servant's name was Faustulus. And he did what the king said. He put the babes in a trough, went down to the river, and saw that the stream was swollen and violent. And he was scared to go close up to it. And he set the babes by the bank, and then went on his way. And they got taken along the river and taken to a small, smooth spot called Camillus, but formerly Germanus. And there's a fig tree nearby.
Yeah. The Vestal, or I keep saying Vestal. Her name's Sylvia.
Sil.
Yeah. Old Sil. Or Little
Sil.
Sil. She could be Sil Junior. I don't know. Sil Senior. Nah, whatever. She claimed that she was raped by Mars. So she claimed that Mars was the father of her children, either because she believed it was so, or because a god was more respectable as the author of the deed. But neither the gods nor men saved either her or her offspring from the king's cruelty. The priestesses bound and put her into custody, and as Paddy said, the king demanded that the boys be put into flowing water, assuming that they would die. Not exactly a quick death. He clearly wasn't that worried if he was just gonna float down the river, I guess. So anyway, yeah, as Paddy said, a servant called Faustulus did the deed, and he dropped them in. No, he didn't drop them in the river. Put them by the blank, and they floated off down. So, I just really want to mention about how far away Alba is from the Tiber. I don't know whether it is because of that the flow of the river has changed, but I look at it on a modern map, like Alba is like miles away from the river. Unless that could have been it. It could have been a tributary or something. That would have made more sense. A tributary river taking it to the Tiber, flowing the kids down onto the Tiber, and then the Tiber taking them. Okay, yeah. I kind of forgot that could have been a thing. GCSE geography coming in useful. So anyway, the kids landed at this point on the river of the Tiber, and being like babies, they just cried and cried. And it wasn't until a thirsty wolf from the nearby mountains turned its course to the boys crying. She was gentle and lowered her teats and offered them to the infants. The she-wolf nursed them, and the woodpecker constantly fed and watched them. These creatures are esteemed holy to the god Mars. The woodpeckers, the Latins still especially worship and honour. So it wasn't until, I'm not sure how long, it doesn't say how long the boys were stuck with the wolf, but the master of the royal herd, whose name was also Faustulus, could have been a different Faustulus, could have been the same Faustulus, not quite sure. But anyway, this Faustulus found the kids with the wolf, and he took the boys home and gave them to his wife, Laurentia, to be raised without any man's knowledge. So clearly they just wanted to steal some babies, really. They were just looking for the perfect opportunity. So as soon as the boys thus born and brought up grew to be young men, they did not neglect their pastoral duties, but their special delight was roaming through the woods on hunting expeditions. As their strength and courage were thus developed, they used not only to lie in wait for fierce beasts of prey, but it even attacked brigands when loaded with plunder. So they kind of acted like the Robin Hood of the classical period, like
vigilantes.
Yeah, vigilantes, taking from the bad and giving back to the poor. So they distributed what they took amongst the shepherds, with whom they were surrounded by a continually increasing body of young men who associated themselves with them. And the two boys undertook in sports, and there's always a big thing about Rome and Greeks. They always like to hit the gymnasium.
Yeah.
Like to get ripped, I guess. I guess they don't have much else to do.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like they can go home and just sit on the internet and create a podcast
and read about Rome.
Yeah. Like, what? They just have to read Greek, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not quite as good as Rome. So
what happened when they were big men?
So there's kind of like a from like the start, Livy and Plutarch kind of agreed on most parts, but here we get like a difference in accounts, really. Plutarch states the twins' actions as being a quarrel between Numitor and Amulius's cowherds, where Amulius's men fell upon these men. Actually, before I go back, I don't think I've mentioned it, but the two boys that we have been talking about for the past 10 or so minutes are actually Romulus and Remus.
Oh, yeah.
Probably should have mentioned that back.
That's what I could,
yeah. Dramatic smoke.
Yeah.
They're Romulus and Remus. Well, that's what they were named. I can't remember. I didn't find out who they were named by. I'm not sure they were named by Old Seal. They're probably named by Faustus, I guess, when he found them, or Laurentia.
Presumably.
Yeah. So anyway, back to.
So Plutarch was saying it was a quarrel between the cowherds.
Yeah, and Amulius's men fell upon Numitor's cowherders, I guess, and what do you call it? Romulus and Remus with him, I guess.
Yeah.
Or they wanted to help. They didn't want Numitor's men to lose their cows, I guess. So what eventually happens that a scuffle broke out between the two cowherds, and not the cowherds, but the people who I'm going to call them cowboys.
Yeah.
They're cowboys. Between two cowboys, and it ended up with Remus being taken prisoner and taken back to Amulius. So that was Plutarch's account.
No, Numitor, I think. It gets taken before. It gets taken
before
it
is
Numitor,
taken before Numitor.
Yeah, Numitor, and then he gets denounced.
Yeah. So they must have just they just wanted to join the fight. It's a bit like a playground fight. They saw there was a fight going on. They just wanted to go, and it just ended up turning into a big old fight. So anyway, Livy kind of follows on from their vigilante work. So he talks about how the boys in their raiding, during a raid, they were it's the same thing. They were ambushed, they're ambushed by brigands who were mad at losing their gold, and they took Remus capture, and they brought him before Amulius, accusing him of their own crimes. So they captured Remus and tried to blame their brigandeering on him. And the principal charge brought against Remus was invading Numitor's land with a body of young men, and carrying off plunder as though in regular warfare. However, both the stories ended up with Remus being captured and taken before Numitor. So I'm guessing after capturing, Numitor Remus must have told the story of his birth. He must have been, or Remus must have been told by his adopted father, Faustus, and the Numitor, upon hearing the story of Remus's birth and computing the ages of the twins, and the young man's looks, came to the conclusion that the twins were his grandchildren. Faustus, hearing that Remus was taken prisoner, called on Romulus to assist him in his rescue, informing him plainly the particulars of his birth. Faustus took the trough. Is it trough? I want to say trowel. No, but trowel is something you use in the garden. No, it's trough.
Yeah.
Took the trough to Numitor, hoping that the realization that Remus was his grandson would spare him, while Romulus gathered the shepherds and his band of merry men. And thus, Romulus was surrounded on all. So I think what happened is Romulus showed up with his men to Alba, and everyone hating Romulus just
joined in.
Yeah, just joined in. Like, there's a big party of shepherds with pitchforks coming. Might as well join the winning side.
Yeah.
So Romulus was surrounded by all sides who wished to remove him. So Romulus reached the city and surrounded it from the outside. And Numitor, knowing that Remus was his grandchild, decided to let him free inside the city. So outside, Romulus is collecting his force. Meanwhile, Remus is rousing the citizens from within to revolt. And Romulus making attacks from outside the city, and Remus attacking from inside the city. The tyrant Romulus, not knowing what to do, was dragged from his palace and killed.
Sheesh.
And thus, Numitor was restored to the throne. So they basically just killed their great uncle to get their granddad on the throne.
Yeah.
So the boys, not wanting to dwell in Alba without governing there, and unwilling to remove their grandfather from power, they left the city to go out and found their own one. Big story there. So this is where the actual genuine founding of Rome starts. So the twins decided that the place of the new city would be where they were discovered along the Tiber.
Makes sense.
Would make sense. It was their birthplace. They were divined by the gods to create their city there, because that's where they were washed up and found. So they decided to go and build the city there because they had quite a lot of followers. So, might as well put those to good use and create their city.
So they had what? So they had two lots of bands of men.
So when they turned up to where they wanted to create the city, they basically, between Romulus and Remus, they couldn't decide which hill to put it on. So, Rome has quite a few hills.
7 hills.
Seven hills, yeah. And Romulus decided that the Palatine Hill should be the location of the new city, whereas Remus disagreed and claimed that the Aventine Hill should be where the new city is. So the two brothers, being unable to decide on the location of the city, quickly the men that followed them split into two factions, and apparently the split was so equal that neither side had more power than the other. So it was like two opposing groups, each wanting to create their city on different hills. So as the boys were twins, or not boys anymore, as the men were twins, and neither could claim to precedence based on seniority, they decided to consult the deities of the place by means of an augury as to who was to give the name to the new city and who was to rule it after it had been founded.
So what's augury?
So an augury is kind of a way of working out whether the gods are on your side or not. So it's different rules for it. There's never one concise rule for an augury. It can there's so many times where one site could mean so many different things. In our case, Romulus and Remus going to be looking at vultures, because vultures were the birds of Mars.
Birds of omen.
Yeah, birds of omen, and they were associated with Mars. Whereas it's kind of often to also get auguries of all kinds of birds, like crows and stuff, and eagles have been used a lot through history. They're even used in like most recent histories. It's always an eagle flying across the field, and it gets taken out by something, or the eagle takes something out, and like, oh yeah, this is going to be us taking out the enemy, like we're the eagle and they're the rabbit, kind of thing. So after deciding that they were going to decide by an augury, they both went back to each other's hill, and they decided to wait for a divination. So it was Remus who saw a divination first. Remus claims that he saw 6 vultures fly over his hill, and upon seeing these vultures, he got one of his men to run across to Romulus to announce that he assumed that he won because he saw vultures. But in fact, as the augury was announced of Remus, double the number of vultures appeared to Romulus. Wow. And not only did they arrive at the hill, but they actually also landed on the hill as well. Wow. So, and like, now Romulus thought he was the big dog because he saw more vultures.
12 vultures, yeah.
But the thing was, Remus saw his vultures first. So Remus,
they both claimed that they
won.
Yeah,
so Remus claimed that he won based on the priority of the appearance, whereas Romulus claimed that he won due to the number of birds. So again, the two parties splitting, each party believing they won, saluted each man as king by each party. They say king, it's like they're like king over like 20 men or something.
Yeah.
I don't know, could have been more than 20 men, but seems weird. They call a guy who's anyway.
So Romulus
gets
to work.
So Romulus, believing that he won, he decided to get to work on construction of his city. So he began to build a trench around the hill, where he decided that the trench would be the location of the walls of the city. This trench would come on to be known as the Pomeranian.
Pomeranian, I think.
Pomeranians, like some place in like So the Pomerian, sorry. The Pomerian would eventually become like a major part of the judicial system of Rome. Like you couldn't cross. It would become obvious why, but you couldn't cross the Pomerium with any weapons, or you couldn't be a general or anything crossing the Pomerium, because then you lose your right to. Is a Pomerian the type of dog as well?
That's a Pomeranian.
Is a Pomeranian?
When I type in Pomeranian, that's the only thing that comes up.
Is it Pannonia? Is the place in Germany?
Sure. I think Pomerania is a place in Germany as well.
Anyway, enough about dogs and other stuff. So Remus, in a rage that his brother began constructing on the Palatine Hill, or not on his hill, marched over to confront his brother. Remus and his companions jumped the trench, and Romulus and his men, being kind of mad that they just jumped his wall so easily, a scuffle began to break out between the two sides. And after the dust settled, Remus had been slain. He lay dead on the field of battle.
Damn.
Or, in this case, field of small fight. So, according to Roman tradition, it was Romulus who delivered the killing blow to his brother. And after the death of his brother, Romulus exclaimed, "So shall it be henceforth with everyone who leaps over my walls." So anyone who crosses his walls, the Pomeranian. Did I say it right? I think I said it right. Pomerian. Say it one again.
It's like
Pomerium, yeah, shall be killed.
Yeah.
So, upon the death of his brother, Romulus became the sole ruler, and thus lent his name to the city, and from henceforth it shall be named Rome.
And now we're doing a podcast about it.
Yeah, and now over 2,500 years later, I'm not quite sure when the founding of Rome was, but it must be a long time. So we're going to end it here for today, and we're going to come back next time and talk about the rest of Romulus's life. From this, we're going to look at the start of this great city that is Rome, from now, the death of Remus, to the death of Romulus, and there's still kind of a lot to cover about Romulus's life. We're only scratched the surface here, really. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening today, and hopefully we will come back and finish off Romulus, and we should also begin to look at other people and start doing research. So I just thought we'd just quickly talk about some other people that we might be looking at. So we might have a look at some other great men that you might have heard of. You might have heard of some of them. But
What are we gonna do? Scipio Africanus.
Yeah, Scipio Africanus. Maybe Gaius Marius.
Yeah.
Maybe the brothers Gracchi. Maybe good old Cicero.
Oh yeah.
Everyone loves Cicero.
Yeah.
And maybe we'd do a 2-part, or not a 2-part, but 2 in 1. So we do Cato and Clodius, because they kind of fighted between each other a lot. So we cover those together.
But yeah, thank you, Elliot, for all your hard work. Putting this podcast together. Couldn't do it without you, man.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. See you later.
Ciao, ciao. Real smooth.